Salam and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. We're always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and you can download our app or watch us on our website. Wow, I can't believe the show we're doing today. We preach democracy to the world, right? We are the flag bearer democracy. We insist on democracy. Although, we cheat in there, we fake it sometime. We support democracy when it fits our national interest. And we sacrifice the call anytime it fits our national interest to support dictators and kings. And we'll do that happily. One principle of democracy which dictators and kings around the world struggle with is the peaceful transfer of power or accepting the result of election. A lot of writing on the streets in the capitals of the world is around elections, fair elections. Remember Egypt? When elections were fake, millions and millions of people came on the streets in what they call Freedom Square or Liberty Square, Tahrir. You see a little image on the screen, but that's in little image, you have millions of people there. And then police brutalized, election happened, they refused to elections, military took over. And then Sisi, he won election, 97% of votes he got. That's how he got himself elected, 97% of the votes. But that was the real fraud in elections. Everybody knew nobody gets 97% of the vote. So when the real fraud took place, the people who were sick and tired of 97% for Mubarak and this and that. But here in America, President Trump created, I'm struggling what to call it. I consider it virtual reality is a field of arts now. That reality is not there, but you combine two realities and it's called virtual realities. It is more in the games industry at this moment, but you can select a furniture based on that. But he created something called fake virtual reality, which probably he believes in that he won the election. And he started tweeting about it. He got tens of millions of followers. And he created this fake virtual reality and he, I think, believes in it. As the conservative Christian preacher said, he probably believes in what he's saying. So followers started believing and they started accepting his lead, and they launched a campaign about the fake election, the real votes, count the real vote, not the illegal vote. And so they had this whole campaign going about the real election, and they started believing more and more. Where did we hear about believing more and more? It was before the Nazi Germany. Well, it was the Nazi Germany in which they coined the thing of propaganda that you keep repeating it, people will start believing it. And certain people in America will definitely were believing. They started protesting the fake realities and wanted the real election. And they refused, because of that fake reality, they refused to accept any decision by state processes, any call by even the elected Republican leaders in their state, and court after courts, including the Supreme Court, will not accept the argument which was being presented. And Sisi created this thing, anti-institution, anti-establishment, and anti-media. These people decided, his followers, to resort to threats, intimidation, and finally, president who has asked his followers to stand back and stand by, actually told them to come now, this is the time. And he asked them to go wild. And some people actually literally dressed as wild. I mean, they had this strange type of skins on them, and they decided, and that is photo you're seeing is in the Capitol, in the U.S. Capitol, right there. So they were wild. So a stunning display of terror on January 6, 2021. But it was not the first time it happened to the Capitol Hill. Not to that magnitude, but historically it has happened when the what is called War of 1812. In 1813, British war was between British and America. So American troops burned down Canadian capital York. So in 1814, they came around and they burned down not only the Capitol building, which was the first time it was breached, I guess, burned down. Whatever the stones were there, everything else was burned down, including Congressional Library, which was there. But they also burned down the White House and the Supreme Court. That the British Army did that. So unfortunately, following that example, probably they have no idea of history. Trump terrorists invaded Capitol Hill and they occupied it. Lawmakers have to duck under their chairs. Congressional leaders were taken to Fort McNair. It's a nearby army base. That's where all the lawmakers were taken. And at least 2 suspected pipe bombs were found, one next to the Republican Party headquarters, which both were safely detonated. That's where police was working. Police found a vehicle which has a suspect, which they detained, and assault rifle and 10 bombs, which were present there. Well, at least somebody was in charge or came out as in charge, and that was our Vice President, Mike Pence, who in that chaos, that's Fort McNair, which you're seeing, that's where he was taken along with the other leaders of the Capitol Hill. It is my considered judgment that my oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not. And the Vice President Pence then ended, "So help me God." That's how he began. And you saw why he was crying for God here. So let's discuss that. And to discuss that, we have a professor of politics and professor of history, Professor Stephen Zunes. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Good to be with you again.
Professor Zunes is professor of politics and international studies at the University of San Francisco. And we also have a professor of history, Scott Keck. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Scott.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
He's associate professor of history and American studies at Trinity College. So, how long did you watch what is going on in DC last night?
Well, I was pretty riveted for a long time. It's a lot to process and a lot to get in, and I know so many people have been scrambling, right, to try to make sense of what happened, both from a cultural and political standpoint to a law enforcement standpoint. There seem to be so many different ways into this topic, and also, as you've started out in your opening, as part of a global story. How do we make sense of this moment at this particular time?
I used to live just 3 blocks from the Capitol, right across from one of the Senate office buildings, and I've spent a lot of time in the Capitol, and so I recognize the various scenes from the mob. And of course, what struck me, the most was that, that for one thing, I've studied coups and revolutions and all sorts of things like that around the world, and to see this going on in my own nation's capital was rather shocking. The other thing that really struck me was having taken part in quite a number actually of peaceful demonstrations in Washington. I've seen a lot more police presence and even National Guard and military presence for these large peaceful protests, for anti-war and racial and environmental justice, and yet you had this very minimal presence when you had this right-wing mob, which was pretty clear what they were going to try to do. I mean, I wasn't alone and expecting they would indeed try to storm the Capitol. So you have to wonder, why wasn't there? I remember that was my thing. That was my sense when I kept watching the scenes unfolding. Is where's the National Guard? Where are the backup forces? I mean, where it was rather shocking in that regard that they were able to essentially just overpower that small group of Capitol Hill police and take over large sections of our nation's capital, including the chambers of the Congress.
For me, it was a little more emotional. I also kept watching. I mean, I have never been on a screen for this long watching somebody else's product as yesterday. It has been. I mean, I don't remember when I have binge watching of the news or things like that. I tune in and tune out. For me, it was emotional from the perspective that I am a first-generation immigrant. I mean, I have a better house there. I have a better car. I have all my relatives. All I had was I was sick and tired of fighting for democracy. And here I am, and I, had tears in my eyes. I felt like, sort of, man, what is it? I have to start all over again. And what is going on here? It was just a very, very distraughful to this. So what do you call it? I mean, different people are using different names. Some are calling violence, some are calling breach, some are calling a riot. CNN bosses allowed CNN to use the term terrorism. I don't know whether they used it or not. Insurgency, attack, protest, or all of the above. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I've been increasingly using the term insurrectionists because there is a clear political trajectory here of intent. I mean, obviously, if you went and interviewed every single person who was part of breaking into the Capitol, they're going to have different explanations. But the overall goal was to, stop and overturn the Electoral College votes from kind of going forward and processing and handing over this, as you said, the problem of transitioning over to another president in 2 weeks.
So, Stephen, what term suits you here? I mean, how do you?
It was initially the media was calling it protesters, which seemed to be a very mild term. Yeah. I think I like the term insurrectionist. I think because they were indeed trying to overturn a democratic process. Actually, it was totally up to me. I think I would use the German term Putschist, which it was often used for the fascist movements. Sorry.
Teach more of that German word which you were saying.
Yeah, Putschist, Putschist. And I mean, there's in Spanish is a term golpistas, but it is those who are attempting a coup, and that's really what we were essentially seeing.
I agree with you. I mean, calling it a violence, sort of a neutral term, or a protest, or a breach, or a riot, I think these words are too light to what traumatic things we have seen. I think insurgency, insurrection, attack, I mean, as a Muslim, we like to apply the word terror to everything else because we get that word all the time. So we say, oh, yeah, CNN, go ahead and call that. So we'll take a short break. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid and Professor Stephen Zunes and Professor Scott Gake are talking with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here. In this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say. Salam! 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 Cut! Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon.
Well, thank you. Welcome back. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. So the mob broke windows, infiltrated both Senate and House chambers, occupied the Pelosi's office, Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Where was the Capitol Police? I mean, there are about 2,000 of them, and they have a $500 million budget. And this building is pretty known building. It's solid building. It's one building. So, and it doesn't have a 10,000 entrances also. So how come they were able to do that? Do you suspect, some, I have seen some videos in police is opening the video in which police is opening the barricade for people to come in. At one place I saw in a video, protester taking selfie with an officer. I don't know whether officer gave him a permission or not, but they seems to be pretty much posing for it. So do you think President Trump saying he's the law and order president have enough ideological supporters in the police? Because they were saying that they police, Capitol Hill police said about a week ago, they are ready for anything on January 6th. President Trump has announced January 6th.
I would have two responses to you, and one, I'll start with what you just said about the sympathies that the law officers in certain cases seem to express with members of the insurrection or terror, as we've now deemed them. There's a long history, right, of law enforcement, and this has happened on the left and right, of law enforcement sympathizing with crowds. I mean, I have to go back to my specialty, right? So during the Great Strikes of 1877, right, National Guard troops throughout the country often are in sympathy with railroad strikers, and are thus deemed kind of incapable of handling the crowds who are striking against railroad corporations in particular. And so sympathies, that is a known facet of law enforcement, and it's often why they bring in law enforcement units from outside of a region or outside, trying to get people from different viewpoints to try and make sure that law officers are going to kind of follow their instructions and commands. But that's a known issue. The other thing, and I think this goes back to some of the things that Stephen was raising when we were talking about, where is this presence, is that, in an instance like this, the federal government is going to be the one that is coordinating the response. And at the head of the federal government, you have the Justice Department and certainly the Pentagon would have been, in on this coordination. But at this particular moment in time, you're talking about Trump supporters. And so I think there's a real tension there that you saw in the tepid response.
So police is administratively responsible to President Trump through Justice Department. Do you have any clear idea?
There obviously there's going to be some serious investigations into what's going on with the chain of command, and I'm not clear. I don't think anybody's really clear right now what happened, but the fact that they did not have, I think a lot of the police were focused on getting the members of Congress and the vice president and others out for safety once the breach took place, and when the outer perimeter was breached, which they did not expect. Apparently, they should have. There wasn't enough reinforcements for the backup to contain to protect the building itself. I think the bigger question is why didn't I don't think the Capitol Police are that politicized in a right-wing sense. In fact, being in the District of Columbia, a disproportionate number of Capitol Police are actually African American. But I think the big question is why didn't they have National Guard units? Why didn't they have the state police from neighboring Maryland and Virginia, which or even regular federal troops, as were deployed during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations this spring? I mean, if you looked at some photos, you had helicopters flying low overhead the crowds. You had all these heavily armed troops surrounding all these federal buildings when nobody was threatening to to storm them or anything like that. And so somewhere, presumably from the White House, they basically blocked efforts to reinforce the Capitol Hill police.
As they were able to do
That-
finally, I think around 5 p.m. or so, they
Yeah,
started.
finally, a little late, but they finally did, bring in the reinforcements. Interestingly, the thing is, the mayor of Washington D.C., wanted to do this, wanted to bring in forces earlier, but these kind of decisions are up to the Department of Defense, not the local government. So, interestingly enough, this has reinforced demands for statehood for the District of Columbia, where the leadership would then have the power to for things like security, would not be dependent on the federal government for public safety.
Right. The mayor had mobilized the National Guard, but they were not deployed to the Capitol until far after the events had started, as a result of, I think, some of the dynamics that we're already speaking about.
What I also notice is even late night when National Guards are there, and some of the, out of hundreds of people who invaded the Capitol, about 47 people were arrested. And they were coming out. Police is standing outside. They're going in, coming out. They were enjoying life. I have seen photos. People standing in Rotunda more busy instead of Trump shouting slogan. They're busy taking selfies with the statues of different presidents and congressperson. It was totally wild. It was invasion, attack, insurgency, but at the same time, they're celebrating, I guess, their occupation by sitting on the speaker's seat or the president of the Senate seat in the same time. So there was time for people to get hold of these people. But in the evening, I saw people being arrested. How they're being arrested? Officer is lightly grabbing somebody's hand and taking them forward. Most of them were not tied behind. None of those people in the evening who were arrested were thrown on the floor. They're face down and somebody sitting on them. So there was very nice, polite treatment, which I noticed even in the evening when police and guard overwhelmed the protesters. So there seems to be a whole lot going to go. But do you think President Trump will come and he will say, well, in a spirit of bringing the world, America together, let's forgive and move forward? Or there is going to be proper investigation and these photos of people who are attacking and breaking windows will be arrested and tried?
Well, I think Trump's statements yesterday already proved, right, that he gains a deep sense of emotional validation from their support, and I think. And I think
he used the word love, right?
Yes, love. He said we love you, and Ivanka also came out with a statement in support of the Patriots that was then later taken down. It also is going forward. They're a large part of Trump revenue going forward, right? Their supporters, buy their merchandise, and there's both a financial and an emotional attachment to these supporters that he is clearly unable to break with. So when you ask, are there going to be investigations going forward? I say we have to wait 2 weeks until a change of administration. I think there are lawmakers who certainly want to, and I would actually say lawmakers on both sides of the aisle at this point that will want an investigation into this more fully, but I don't have great confidence for political investigations in the last few years because of the great political divides that have kind of driven Congress in particular. But look, Trump's legacy in terms of right-wing terror, was already established by the time we got to this moment. It's now cemented, and I think that it's tough. It's tough to watch the world reaction to this, and it's tough because for many of us, we have been speaking about the potential for this for 4 years already because of the constant normalization of violent activity. I mean, right? People learn how to act with violence, and it's not a coincidence that many of these right-wing militia members have also served in the military. And if you continue to validate their action in normal civil action, civil daily life, at some point, it's you're going to find the right situation where.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is all was expected. I remember about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, I purchased about 100 books on authoritarianism and how it comes and distributed to different people, because people in America seems to have no notion of how authoritarianism and dictatorship and how non-democratic discourse results in non-democratic actions and destroy democracy. So I purchased books from several people and given out to people, and very reasonable people who love and care for me. As President Trump love and consider special people who invaded the Capitol Hill, and they will not read it. I mean, they simply will dismiss this. So are we, as a nation, have we closed our mind to authoritarianism? Are we too comfortable with what we got?
I think I'm a little more hopeful in the sense that I think there's a growing sense that they really went too far this time. That I think we are already seeing divisions between conservatives who may take positions that I and other left-leaning people may strongly disagree with, and on very important issues, to be sure, but generally support the system, and those who are willing, for the sake of their ideological beliefs, essentially be willing to overthrow the system and establish some kind of authoritarianism. And the U.S. Capitol has a lot of important symbolism in the United States in terms of being a hall of democracy, and a lot of it's a little over idealized in my view, but it's one that's really that's taken quite seriously. So I think there is going to really be some pushback. I think with the Democratic administration and Democrats controlling both houses of Congress now, there will be serious investigations. I think there will be at least some Republicans who are willing to support such investigations. One thing about running through the Capitol is they have security cameras everywhere. I mean, they're covering every inch. So if they can, if they choose to, track down and prosecute every single person who trespassed. The majority of people arrested, interesting, I think only 13 were arrested for trespassing on the Capitol, again, when there were actually many hundreds inside. Most of the arrests were people violating curfew and the clashes that took place afterwards when they were outside. But it would be very disturbing if we didn't have a large-scale prosecution, for others who did break into the building, especially since presumably they have the evidence.
You're right about the symbolism of Capitol Hill. I mean, when we talk about the government or DC, it's not the White House image which is normally seen. It's the Capitol Hill images which are seen. I mean, it is. Everybody knows that symbol, and the symbol, the smoke surrounding it and all of that. I think is I agree with you, Stephen, that. This may not go lightly, but we'll take a short break. When we come back, we want to talk about that Capitol Hill was invaded and attacked before. So a little bit of history. One of the things which I learned reading about that is that there was a Library of Congress used to be in Rotunda. I had no notion of that. And that was burned down by the British. So a little bit of history, I think, is going to help us at this moment. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. And with me is a professor of politics and a professor of history, Professor Zunes and Professor Gak. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum.
I love Adam's world because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's world because it makes me happy. What? No. And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking with Professor Stephen Zunes and Professor Scott Gahn. Scott, why American invaded Canada, which probably nobody knows anymore, and were British in more control of Canada, so British took attack on them and they attacked the Capitol Hill. What happened actually? You were there, right?
Well, yes, I was there. Throughout between 1790 and pretty much 1850, right? The United States is kind of, there are facet or wings of lawmakers and presidents even who are constantly thinking not only of invading southward, which actually does happen, of course, in the 1840s, but taking territory northward in Canada. And of course, when British still wield control in Canada, that is seen often as particularly attractive. The United States in the early 19th century is a vulnerable nation from a security standpoint, right? There are empires surrounding it. There are indigenous populations that are at war with the United States. So this kind of late 20th century vision of stable stable Americanism and kind of an exceptional nation and world leader, right? That doesn't apply to the United States in the 19th century. And so when you start to think about, oh, well, wait, the British show up in Washington, D.C., which is a very, very young capital at that moment, and burn buildings down. You have to, you can connect it to this moment. You can also connect, of course, the 1850s or the election of 1860 as, and the secession of the southern states. And we saw Confederate flags yesterday walking through the Capitol, which doesn't happen actually in the 1860s. But that's a disputed election in many ways, right? The secession is in many ways tied to the election of Abraham Lincoln and a rejection of the policies that are going to be put in place. And so, yeah, there are some deep historical parallels if we want to look for them and kind of be honest with the fragility of democracy. I mean, yesterday we brought it up before, and we'll say it again, right? I think Mike Pence might have been, his decision could have literally, this could have gone much worse yesterday. If Mike Pence says, you know what, actually, I do have the authority, what kind of mechanisms with a violent mob, what kind of mechanisms are going to, how is that going to play out over 24 hours? I think you have a much, much worse scenario. I mean, I find it stunning to say it, but, thank you to Mike Pence for standing true to tradition and constitutionalism.
So, Professor Zunes, you want to be nice to Pence also?
Well, I mean, Christian, I mean, in certain ways, Pence ideologically is even more right-wing than Donald Trump. He's also a Christian supremacist,
Yes.
but he is one. I think he was smart enough to realize just how reckless Trump's actions was, and after just being the smiling yes man to Trump for nearly for over 4 years. I think he pretty much saw the writing on the wall. I mean, I don't know how much of it was actual integrity on his part, or recognition that he probably couldn't get away with it. And Pence probably wants to run for president someday, and so I think he realized his chances would be better if he wasn't seen as part of what I still think would have been an unsuccessful coup, though a much messier, and even more drawn out and dangerous in many respects than what happened yesterday.
Professor Zinn,
This does go down to what I'm saying is about the split within the conservative movement by conservatives who are still willing to work within our system, and conservatives who are willing to essentially go in a more fascist direction and try to overthrow it.
before show began, I was talking to Scott, and he brought an interesting point that anytime there are major historic, demographic shifts and shifts in political environment, divisions and these type of things rise up, and the demographic shift, which is projected, in which whites are going to be a minority as compared to all the minorities who are going to turn majority. This whole thing is connected with that.
Very much so.
There is a possibility, I may not have said as well as Scott would say, but considering demographic shift, do you think that whatever we saw yesterday and all the Trump followers, not only just the Twitter followers, but the people who voted, that his votes, people sort of will split into a Trump party, and we will see another version of a third party? Is there any possibility of that?
There's certainly a possibility that is the more fascist-oriented folks who do not, who can't accept the losing of white privilege, which again is white Christian privilege, which is inevitable, I think, given the demographic changes that are happening in the United States over time. What concerns me more is not that not that any far right party would win an election. In fact, as a Democrat, I could be cynical enough to say, well, hey, if it splits the Republican Party in two, that's good for us, But I'm less afraid of some people than actual fascist takeover. But I do fear that we will see a rise of right-wing terrorism and other forms of right-wing violence. And I'm talking about as we saw in Oklahoma City, back in the late 1990s, where they blew up a federal building, killing 150 people. We could, there were pipe bombs planted that could have gone off, that could have killed a lot of people yesterday. Fortunately, they were found and defused. But I think we really will see something of a lashing out. Now, I grew up in the American South, and we had right-wing terrorism. We had the Night Riders, we had the Ku Klux Klan. Hundreds of people died. We had, as a result of those who were desperately trying to hold on to the white supremacy that was institutionalized at the time. And I don't doubt we're gonna see another wave of that, only on a national level, and perhaps even worse. So that's more of my concern than actual takeover. Which I think is very unlikely, but I do think that we will see the rise of right-wing violent extremism, to be sure.
And the FBI has been marking domestic terrorism, specifically right-wing domestic terrorism and white supremacist groups, as on the rise for the last 6 years or 8 years. And we do also know that the Trump administration, right, refused to kind of provide over the political will to start to counter those movements.
In fact, they quite consciously eliminated or removed people who were working on that to focus exclusively on so-called Islamist terrorism.
Right.
And focus on that instead of the far greater threat, which is domestically from the Christian right.
So that's my question, which you have brought me to that level to ask that question. When Oklahoma bombing happened, when it happened, I was traveling. I landed in Seattle airport, and as a Muslim leader, I had called for a press conference. Except that as soon as I landed, officers with guns and officers without uniform and dogs surrounded me at the gate of the plane. And they kept with me until in the press conference. And I was so happy to see there were about 70, 80 people in the press conference. I have never done a press conference better than audience. As soon as I started condemning, they started looking towards each other. And I was left with about 6 reporters. So it turned out actual reporters were only 6. So the question I have is, while the right-wing terrorism has been there, violence in America, political violence in America, as Scott will say, is not a new thing in our country. But recognition at the popular level, at the media level, solidifying that it is something there. So I would not give all blame to Trump for eliminating one office to watch right-wing terrorism, but the media overall has not focused on that. Very few people, for example, know this. 2 facts I will submit to you. One is it was a Time magazine story about the militias, rising militias in the early days of Obama administration when people were buying more guns and all that. Buried in there was a small story that a right-wing guy was shot dead by his wife in a domestic case of domestic dispute or violence. And that guy has enough material, nuclear material, to be made to build a dirty bomb. Now, just a couple of years before, US government was spending $500 million checking all the mosques for the nuclear, some traces of if there are radioactivity around the mosque. Both of these stories are not part of the mainstream media, although Time magazine is, but this story was buried in there. So do you think American consciousness about the real threat in America of domestic violence will come to the level there is a one term which describes them and it is all over the media? So media, instead of remaining around dancing around the tweets of President Trump, will deal with the challenge which we are facing. Do you think this will happen, or the terrorism bogey about Muslims have been built enough? And it is bound to happen. Somebody going to do something anywhere in the world, and media can take advantage of it to go after Muslims in America. Do you see any change in the overall civil discourse on this topic?
Well, the hierarchies of race and religion in the United States are quite strong, right? And in many ways, they're right when we talk about systemic racism or even systemic violence, right? We're talking about these hierarchies of difference. And there are people historically who have always tried to work against those hierarchies, right? To create more visions of equality, and that would be applicable in this place, right? To pay attention to the data on what is the most pressing threat to domestic security at this moment in time. But there's also a very long history of when the threats are people who have white complected skin, who tend to be more on the conservative side rather than more on the progressive side. Those people are treated with much more. I would call it even with respect, rather than right. They're listened to in ways, and their violence is accepted in ways that violence perpetrated by others is not. And so you're asking a great and important question, but I think it gets to a very deep systemic, kind of internal look that I don't know that there's enough political will at this moment to kind of bring that undertaking and launch it forward from this moment. I don't know that that's there. I would love to be more hopeful.
Stephen, do you think the image of capital being invaded is going to have a lasting impact in changing the discourse about the right-wing extremism?
I hope so, and I think with the new administration and a new Congress, that people will be taking it more seriously. I mean, I think the overall prejudices and biases unfortunately are going to remain, but I think they'll certainly be less institutionalized than we have had under the Trump administration. And I think a lot of it is up to up to us. It's just up to people who really do who want to fight these kinds of prejudices and Islamophobia. Those of us who recognize the real threat from the far right to keep up the pressure and to and to mobilize, because I think there's after the Oklahoma, there was a rise in the far right during the Clinton administration, and with these various armed groups and far right conspiracy theories. And the Oklahoma City bombing actually it halted the momentum of that. It was shocking enough that people started taking it more seriously. There were more investigations, more arrests. Certain conservative Republican politicians that were willing to engage in photo ops with some of these kind of people stopped doing so. So I think that this will have a similar shock value that while won't resolve the problem overall, I think it is going to enable people to take things more seriously, and at least steer things a little more in the right direction.
Okay, so for immediate future, I mean, today the Trump party is demonstrating on the state capitals. What do you expect in next 14 days will happen?
Well, I actually don't expect much to happen in the next 14 days. I expect us to limp along to actually use that inauguration stage, which was seen in many different formats yesterday, to actually use it for the intended purpose. But in many ways, I also think that this whole entire show, the show of force, this show of supposed fraud, has taken away from some really pressing issues of food insecurity in a nation that has, by historical standards, an incredible amount of food. We also have an incredible amount of food insecurity that is both linked and not linked to the pandemic. There are a lot of very serious issues that have been, just thrown to the wayside as a result of this political battle that is now literally spilled out into the Capitol building. And I think in the next 14 days, well, can I go to like day 16? By day 16, I think we get back to looking at these large, very pressing issues of economic and food instability that need to be addressed right now because people are hurting.
Well,
a lot of people are concerned, obviously, about what that Trump may be totally unhinged at this point. That there's talks of invoking the 25th Amendment that would be able to remove him from office without a formal impeachment trial. And I don't know if that I somewhat doubt that'll come to fruition, but at least people are talking about, including some Republicans, including some wealthy business groups that tend to support the Republican Party, and also the very fact that one interesting point that a lot of people miss, that in deciding to finally deploy the National Guard, the acting Secretary of Defense said he'd done so in consultation with Vice President Pence and the Senate and House leadership, et cetera. But it didn't mention President Trump. That in many ways, de facto, a lot of people are kind of working around the president. I think people pointing out the irony that his Twitter account has been suspended, but he still has the nuclear codes. But, I think that I'm concerned, very much about, like we should be about what may happen in the next 12 days. But I think what happened yesterday there'll be some, I think, limits to what he can get away with, because I think a lot of people, frankly, would not follow his orders as one would normally follow a president's order. But let me just emphasize here that just kind of circling back to what you said at the outset. I mean, we talk about how we oppose coups and we support democracy. That's true of the United States, but in terms of our own country. But as you noted, the United States has supported dictatorships. We've supported coups overseas, and indeed Biden himself, if you look at his Senate record, supported billions of dollars of arms transfers to various dictatorships. He supported the Israeli occupation. Indeed, what's rather disturbing is that that you have this far right reaction to someone who is decidedly centrist in this political views. I mean, what if Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren were about to be inaugurated a president? I mean, somebody who really was somewhat, really was on the left. So I think we need to. I'm heartened to see the defense of American democracy that we have seen in the hours since the storming of the Capitol. But I think perhaps we can use this as an opportunity to remind us that the freedom and democracy and having an elected government is not something that's for Americans alone. The entire world deserves that, and I'm not really. I have very mixed feelings about so-called democracy promotion by the United States, but at least we shouldn't be promoting dictatorships. At least we should not be making it difficult for people who are struggling for democracy in their respective countries to make that possible. Through our security assistance and our diplomatic and financial aid to governments that want to deny that to their own people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Professor Stephen Zunes is a professor of politics, and Professor Scott Keck, professor of history. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate your time and your wisdom. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. And thank you for watching. This is Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, which reaches 57 million people. A lot of them are in rural America, where I hope we are being heard and watched, and also on Apple TV, Amazon TV, Fire TV. You can download our app, and Muslim Network TV. Peace. Salam.